looks like they're going to be hard to stop once again. I did predict them for the minor premiership, so I'm pretty happy with that prediction so far. However, the Rabbitohs definitely held their own. I was a bit worried at the start of the first half, or halfway through the first half. I thought it could turn into a blowout, but the bench players came on, Cronulla-Sutherland and Jai Arrow, and I guess you can argue Benji Marshall as well, and they really changed the game.
Queensland! It's a miracle! Oh, yeah!
Balotelli! Aguero!
Hello and welcome to episode 111 of the On The Ball podcast today. I'm here by myself. I've not managed to get a guest today, but that's alright because we will be talking about probably one of my favourite sports, if not my favourite sport, the NRL. It returned on the weekend for round one of the competition, and it was a pretty successful round, I thought. Crowds were back up to, I think, 50%, maybe more at some grounds, but I know it was 50% in Melbourne at the game I went to, Storm versus Rabbitohs. It was, a pretty good round of footy. I thought there was a little bit of rust there, which you would expect for round one, but I thought overall there were some pretty good performances, and I think some of the competition leaders already have shown themselves, really played their cards and shown how good they really could be this year, even though it is still 25 rounds or so from finals. So today I'm going to be using the NFL format that we used during the NFL season. So we'll go through winners of the week, so teams, players, coaches, etc. Then losers. Then we'll have a running finals bracket for the whole season each week. I'll talk about my changes to my predicted top 8. Then we'll go through a bit of the team of the week situation. And then I'll make some predictions for next week's games and maybe discuss some of the headlines that we will be looking out for. So to start this week, as I mentioned, some of the big dogs really put their best foot forward straight out of the blocks at round one. So I'm just going to, they're my first winners, the big 5 teams. The big 5 teams I'm calling the Rabbitohs, the Storm, the Raiders, the Panthers, and the, who have I missed there? The Roosters. So sadly, the Eagles just aren't considered in my big dog bracket just yet. They all were pretty impressive. They all won except for the Rabbitohs, who had to play the Storm, but I think arguably those 2 performances on Thursday night were the best 2 performances of the round, I guess you could argue. The Roosters absolutely dispatched Manly. Yes, Manly don't look like a good team, but to put 46 points up against anyone in round one's pretty impressive when you don't have your full roster there. Bradley and Verrills obviously to come back. And Boyd Cordner. The Raiders I thought were pretty impressive. The Tigers were pretty resolute in defence, but I don't think the Tigers threw too much at them offensively. However, the Raiders still put them away pretty comfortably. The Panthers, I thought the Panthers were probably the least impressive out of the 5. Yes, they won without even showing signs of losing. They didn't concede a single point. However, I don't think their offense was looking that good. Yes, people said the Cowboys defended well on Twitter, but I completely disagree. They missed the most tackles in the whole competition for the round. They missed 42 and had, I think, the lowest tackle efficiency of any team. So I'm not sure where those calls were coming from, and if it wasn't for Hamiso Tabuai Finneau, they probably would have conceded 2 more tries. So I don't think the Panthers were that outstanding, but they still, held a team to 0, which is pretty impressive in the NRL. And then obviously the Storm and Rabbitohs, as I mentioned. The Storm were absolutely freakish in that first 10 minutes. It looks like they're going to be hard to stop once again. I did predict them for the minor premiership, so I'm pretty happy with that prediction so far. However, the Rabbitohs definitely held their own. I was a bit worried at the start of the first half, or halfway through the first half. I thought it could turn into a blowout, but the bench players came on, Cronulla-Sutherland and Jai Arrow, and I guess you can argue Benji Marshall as well, and they really changed the game. Jai Arrow gave the forward pack something, the back something to get behind in terms of running the ball up the middle. And I think the Rabbitohs, I don't even think they were playing really too far out of first gear. They were obviously trying, but they almost won the match, and I don't think they really hit their peak level. I don't think Cody Walker had a great game. I don't think Damien Cook had a great game. So that's pretty exciting for Rabbitohs fans to see. So they're going to be my first winners, all 5 of those teams. Probably won't go into too much depth today, as it is just round one, and it's hard to read too much into these round 1 fixtures, but I think those 5 teams are the ones we're going to be, comparing all year. Maybe throw the Eels in there sometimes, but those 5 teams are going to be the real ones who are going to be competing for the premiership this year. So each week they're probably going to be the teams we look to see who is dropping and who's winning that race, if you know what I mean. Next up, I actually didn't catch this game. I caught all but 2 of the matches. I didn't see the Warriors-Titans because I had cricket, and I didn't see the Dragons-Sharks because I had cricket as well. The Warriors upset the Titans, which I think puts them the number 1 winner of the week. They won 19-6, completed at 91%, which was the best completion rate across the league. They had the second most post-contact meters of any team in the NRL, which just means your forwards are doing the hard yards or your outside backs. So post-contact meters is from the point you've been contacted by the defensive line, how much further do you go, and that's obviously all added up. So they had the second most of any team there. I just wanted to highlight Adam Finneau-Blake. I talked about him in the preview episode. I do believe he is arguably the best prop in the competition. On his day, he's almost unstoppable, and he was on Saturday. He had 202 metres from 19 runs, including 94 post-contact metres, so almost every second metre he made was after contact. He had 5 tackle breaks and 4 offloads, so that's pretty incredible stats there. It's going to be hard to, win the forward pack battle when one of the big props is doing that for the Warriors. There were other guys who were impressive. Well, Bailey Sirenan was impressive. He got over the white line. Tohu Harris was reliable as always, and I think, in particular me, the reason I had the Warriors actually slipping this year is I just thought it would be too much of an ask for them to back it up in Australia yet again. But look, they've got off to the perfect start. They've beat a highly praised Titans lineup, who, yes, aren't completely gelled together yet, but still on paper look like they should be beating this Warriors team. So that's very exciting for the Warriors, and looks like they've picked up exactly where they left last year. And also, that probably puts Nathan Brown in the winners column, because all his signings look to have made a pretty good start in the Warriors, and they look like they feel at home at Central Coast yet again. So that's going to be good for them moving forward. My final winners are the Broncos. They did lose to the Eels. However, they were within 2 points of the win as the Eels scored in the last minute to, not blow it out, but you know what I mean, make it look a bit better than it was. So it was 18-16 with a minute to go. The Broncos completed 85% of their sets, which is obviously pretty key stat. Yes, sometimes it can be misleading because you can just complete your sets and offer absolutely nothing in attack, but it generally shows that you've had a pretty solid game. Patrick Carrigan and Tom Flegler were pretty awesome. Had crazy stat lines. Alex Glenn was pretty good after what I thought was a pretty bad year on his behalf last year. I think he was injured for a bit of it, but when he was on the field, I think he was far from his former self. And Milford and Croft both showed signs. I think they both had a line break assist and a try assist, so they showed signs. That doesn't look like they're going to be the best halves in the competition or absolutely tear it up, but if they can just be reliable, solid halves with a moment of flair, once a week and set up a try each, you can't really ask too much more from them. The outside backs played pretty well. Farnworth, Tessie New and David Mead all had over 50 post-contact meters, which is what you want. David Mead scored in his return to the NRL after his stint with the Catalans Dragons. And Tavita Pangai, who I actually thought had a bit of an off game. Usually Pangai is one of those guys who you can't not see, if you know what I mean. He's always in the action. He actually only had just over 100 meters, I think. Don't quote me on that, but he had 7 offloads, so you can't really criticize him there because he's basically creating could be up to 70 meters in offloads there. So that's pretty awesome stuff from him. That's pretty much all my winners for the week. Normally it's going to go a bit longer because I'm going to do a bit more in-depth analysis on the teams, but A, because it's round 1, and B, I'm a little bit time pushed this week. At the moment, I'm just a little bit time pushed because I'm playing cricket Saturdays and Sundays, so it doesn't leave me too much time for uni work and the potty. But so I'll do a bit more in-depth analysis in the following weeks. But they're all my winners, all had very impressive weeks. Onto my losers, the Titans. Basically just on the flip side of the Warriors being a winner, they have to be a loser. They only managed 6 points against the Warriors team, who at times weren't great in defense last year. Everyone was pretty keen on them. I've seen it a lot in a lot of sports recently. It happens a lot in the NFL where a team will make a lot of off-season signings. They'll get really hyped up and they just don't deliver. And it's usually the following season where they impress because the hype's died down a little bit. The pressure's a little bit lower, but I'm not ruling the Titans out yet. I'll talk about where I've still got them finishing coming up, but yeah, it's a little bit of a worry there. You'd expect them to be beating the Warriors with the team they've got, but yeah, who knows? And also, based on my predictions, I was kind of thinking that they might have got Cam Smith, and now he's retired. We know that. It won't be happening, so they've got to bounce back in the following few weeks to get some wins on the board. Otherwise, they'll be in a bit of a sticky situation early. But yeah, I didn't watch that game, so I can't comment on it too much. My next loser is Manly. I thought Manly didn't have the worst performance of the week. I actually think someone else did, but they were pretty woeful against the Roosters, let's be honest. The Roosters were clinical at best. Not at best, but as usual, at their best. Brett Morris scored a hat-trick. James Tedesco scored a hat-trick. They just looked awesome. Pretty much every chance they had to score a try, they put it away. But yeah, Manly were just horrible. They missed 39 tackles, which was the third most across the competition. Cherry Evans, who's normally meant to be leading from the front, he had 3 errors. And yes, I know he does have to do a lot for this team, but that's not really good enough. And we actually saw it a little bit at the back end of last year. He had a couple stinkers where he was very error prone. So I'm not saying he's past his prime and he's going to stop being that reliable, consistent halfback that we know and love. But maybe he's going to start to put up these stinkers a little bit more often. But I hope not, because Cherry Evans is really good to watch when he's on. I thought Dylan Walker did not look natural at fullback at all. He was passing most of his kick returns, which is fair enough if that's the tactic he wants to go with. But he didn't get involved too much in the passing game, and I just didn't think he had too much impact on the match at all. So I'm not sure what they'll do there. That could be, the teams are announced this afternoon when I'm recording this, so that could be a change we see from Des Hasler. But yeah, Manly just really poor. A lot of errors that led to tries. Yes, the Roosters were good, but Manly were just pretty sloppy overall. Hopefully Kieran Foran's not injured. He was limping for most of the second half because I'm sick of seeing that great man injured. But yeah, there weren't too many positives. Jack Gashevsky, he missed a lot of tackles, but he played alright, I guess. He's one that could improve for the season. But yeah, apart from that, Alawai had a bit of an underwhelming debut. Didn't see too much of him. And yeah, not too much positive to talk about Manly, sadly. Some people have talked about them in the top 8, but off that performance, I think you're pretty hard. It's a hard task to argue their case at the moment. Next up, I have Todd Payton's Cowboys. I thought they were the worst team of the week. People were complimenting them like they were the Tigers, actually, on their resolute defence, but I'll be honest, I think both of their performances were overrated a little bit. I probably won't talk too much about the Tigers this week because I don't actually think they were that bad. I think they were just up against a good Raiders team, but I think their performance was being a little bit overrated. I don't think they threw much at them in offense, but the Cowboys looked absolutely woeful in my opinion. They lost 24-0. Talked about the Titans only scoring 6 points. For the Cowboys to not score a single point, that's pretty poor. Missed the most tackles across the competition with 42. People were saying their defense was good. And yes, I'll cop that for the first 20. But from then on, I thought their defense was actually really bad. And the stats kind of backed me up there with the most tackles across the competition. Some of those line breaks Nathan Cleary and Dylan Edwards were making, yes, they were impressive bits of play with bursts of speed, but there shouldn't be gaps up the middle of the field where someone can just run a straight line through. Like, yes, you can forgive it if they, sidestep a big tiring forward or something like that, but when there's just a genuinely big gap, like there was for Dylan Edwards' try when Josh Maguire was just doing circles, I don't know what was going on there. That's pretty disappointing. Yes, it was round 1, so you can maybe blame a little bit of a lack of fitness on their poor defence, but for a team that's used to hot conditions and stuff, you think they would maybe be in their element early on, whereas other teams from the colder climates wouldn't necessarily be. But they also had the most errors with 18. That's just not good enough. That's almost 1 every 4 minutes, which is basically 1 every 2 sets. You can't really win a game doing that. They conceded 7 penalties, and I'm sure a lot of those were 6 again. And with the 6 again, you just got to limit your penalties. Tamalolo had 9 runs for 73 metres. They were obviously talking a lot about it in the coverage, and I completely agree with what they're saying. He only played 51 minutes, so I think they've really got to have a conversation at the Cowboys facilities or offices and talk about what they want from Tamalolo. I do understand that last year, some of the games he was playing 80 minutes, his impact was less because, he was kind of having to extend his effort over a longer period of time rather than going hard for a short time. But if he's only going to get 9 runs in 51 minutes and he's only going to run, around 8 metres a carry, I know that's more down to him than the management, how many metres per carry he gets, but that's just not good enough from someone who they're paying $1 million a year. Also, the fact that Val Holmes is on $1 million a year and playing wing is an absolute joke. That's probably one of the worst contracts I've ever seen. How he managed to get $1 million a year contract coming back from another sport is out of this world. Michael Morgan's also on $1 million, and right now he's probably playing like a $600,000 half. So I tweeted about it earlier. Go check out my Twitter if you haven't already, and my other social medias. But it's probably one of the worst organised caps when you've got $3 million stuck up with Tamalolo, Morgan and Holmes when they're not really providing much for you at the moment. Looking at the back row, Cohen Hess and Mitch Dunn played 80 minutes each, and they had 11 runs between them for 80 metres. And yes, I know it's not necessarily a back rower's job to take hit-ups. It's more the middle forwards and the outside backs, but this is something I noticed last year. They just don't I know it's a new coaching staff, but the back rowers for the Cowboys just don't have impact on the game, and I'm not sure what it is. But I noticed it last year, Cohen Hess and Mitchell Dunn, I hardly even saw them all night. And Jake Clifford also had a pretty disappointing game. Yes, Vossi, I think, who was commentating, was complimenting him for running the ball when he could, which is true. He looks exciting. He's a bit like Luke Brooks in that fact. When he does run, he is exciting, but he got tackled, I think, 3 or 4 times on the 5th tackle without a kick. A couple times it was in really poor field position, 40, 30 out from their try line, and that sets up basically a try-scoring opportunity for Penrith. And he also had 4 errors, which is not really good enough. Just mentioned him, but I also thought Luke Brooks had an absolute shocker against the Raiders. But won't talk too much about the Tigers this week. We'll save them for another week. So I think the Cowboys have some real soul-searching to do. They have a really winnable game this week against the Dragons up in town. So it's going to be really huge for them to bounce back. If there's any positives, I guess you could say Hammer. He didn't show much in attack, but he saved a couple tries on Charlie Staines, so well done to him. But apart from that, not too much to mention. Alright, now looking at my top 8 bracket. I predicted the Storm, Rabbitohs, Roosters, Panthers, Eels, Knights, Titans, Raiders coming into the season. I have to say, I don't want to just backtrack because it's round 1, but I didn't really believe in my Raiders prediction. I just didn't want to have the same top 5 or 6 as I did last year. Because I think that's pretty rare that happens, but I honestly do believe the Raiders are a really good team and I shouldn't have predicted them at 8. I should have stuck with my guns. My new top 8 is, I've still got the Storm coming first. I think their performance, if anything, solidified my belief that they are the best team in the competition, especially over the regular season. I've got the Rabbitohs in second. I do think the Rabbitohs will be a little bit less consistent than the likes of the Storm or the Roosters, but I think they will be able to compete with a lot of the big teams, which they didn't necessarily do last year. But they should be good enough to put away all the bad teams, and a few more wins against the good teams. I think they could be pushing for second. The Roosters I'm going to put third. Based off the weekend, it's hard not to see why they can't win the minor premiership, but I just think they're a bit older, so they're probably going to have a few more injuries. They've got a few guys coming back from injury. It might take them a while to get back into it. Origin always hurts the Roosters more than it does most teams, so I'm going to put them in at third. Also, I think Lockie Lamb had a pretty good game. I'll mention that. The Raiders I've got now up at fourth. I think putting them at eighth was pretty stupid for me. I think their home field advantage down in Canberra is so strong. I think they could beat almost any team on their day. And to think how well they played, and they have Corey Horsburgh and Corey Harawira-Naera to come back, that forward pack is outrageous. I've got the Panthers down at 5. Yes, I think they were impressive to hold the Cowboys to 0 points, but I just don't think they looked as good as they did last year. Yes, it's round 1, but I think the other teams I've put higher looked better. I got the Knights in at 6. They had a bit of a no-thrills victory over the Bulldogs. They just did what they needed to do in a wet game. So I'm pretty confident they'll make finals. I'm not too sure, though. I just think they're better than the likes of the Warriors, the Titans, the Tigers, etc. Not sure why I just said etc, etc. But 7th, I've got the Eels. I've dropped them down from 5th. I just think just creatively, they just don't look that good. Last year, they didn't look good at times. This year, they look like they've picked up where they left off last year. Moses and Dill Brown just really need to step it up because they need some creative flair. And then number 8, I've gone the Titans. I've still got them making the 8 just because I do think they're more likely to beat a big team than the Warriors and steal a few points against those teams that you wouldn't expect it from. But it's worrying for them. And if they have another poor performance, someone like the Sharks might push into that 8 for me. Moving into the Players of the Week section. So I've split it into backs and forwards, and then I also will do a Rookie of the Week, which is what I did for the NFL, but I have noticed in the NRL there's actually not that many rookies because you have to play less than 5 matches. And I made a list of them, and there's about 8 blokes, and 6 of them I didn't even notice on the weekend. So backs of the week, I haven't done any stats for this, I've just gone off the eye test. My third best player in the backs was James Tedesco. Scored a hat-trick against Manly, was back to his best. Some of his best talent, in my opinion, is his defensive play, his defensive reads, but we didn't have to see that on the weekend. He didn't really have too many big line breaks, but he was just there or thereabouts when they needed him to score. He set up a few plays as well, so I thought he was pretty good. Number 2, I've got Latrell Mitchell. I don't think statistically he was as good as some of these other players, but just from what I saw at the match myself, he was pretty impressive. Every time he would run the ball back, he would bump off 2 or 3 tacklers. He obviously he scored that try where, it looked like it was set up for a block play and he just went, stuff it, I'm just going to run this over. So that was pretty impressive. And then, I thought he was the standout in the backs for the Rabbitohs. And number 1, I'm actually going to go George Williams. I don't think this would be a popular opinion, but I thought he was really good against the Tigers. I think the Tigers' weakness is probably their kick pressure. They're not very good at it like some other teams, but he really thrived on that. He put a few balls on an absolute dime. I think it was their second last try. Can't remember who scored it, but one of the outside backs jumped up and tapped it down. But that was a really good performance from George Williams. Forwards of the week. Number 3, I've gone with Daniel Scifidy, absolute meter eater up against the Bulldogs. He was easily their best player, in my opinion. The commentators were raving about him all day, and he deserved it. The Bulldogs just couldn't stop him. He just kept breaking through, popping up through that middle. And he was really impressive, just like he was last year and the year before that. Jai Arrow, I thought was really good. I have to be honest, Jai Arrow is one player I actually don't know too much about in terms of how good he is. Obviously, everyone rates him highly, but maybe it's because the Titans and they weren't in the most relevant games in previous seasons, but I've never really seen him have like an absolutely standout game, but seeing him in person on Thursday, I gained an appreciation for Jai Arrow. What he did off the bench was incredible. I think Totola and Bird just really were lacking in that first 20-30 minutes, and then Jai Arrow came on. I thought Cronulla-Sutherland was a little bit iffy, but people were raving about him on Twitter, so who knows. I thought Arrow was easily the best player for the Rabbitohs across the whole park. He really brought them back into that game with big charges through that middle, regularly getting 12-15 metres a carry, so I thought he was really good. And number 1, I'm actually going another Canberra player. I'm going Hudson Young. I thought he was absolutely unreal against the Tigers. He looks like he's going to turn into one of the best back rowers in the competition. I'm interested to see what they do with Harawira Naira and Horsburgh. Obviously, that bench is going to be stacked because it already was on the weekend. They had Ryan Sutton, Ryan James. So I'm not sure if Hudson Young's going to have to drop back to the bench, but at this rate, you surely couldn't do that. And Harawira and I will just have to settle for the bench, or Whitehead. Hudson Young had an absolutely outstanding game, and he picked up where he left off in the back end of last year. Him and Joe Tarpany have kind of taken... Papali'i is obviously playing really well. But Tarpany and Young have definitely stood up in the last 6 weeks, including the back end of last year. And they've really started to help him out. And now that forward pack is as good as it ever has been. And then Rookie of the Week. I can't lie, this guy's probably going to get it most weeks. But Dane Laurie. If you look at the other guys going for Rookie of the Week, there was just not really many options. Daniel Saluka, fifth feeder, he only played like 20 minutes. Charlie Staines didn't do much. Sebastian Chris had a disallowed try. Stefano Utokomanu didn't play many minutes. So Dane Laurie, yes, he's at fullback, so he's going to have more impact than guys on the wing and stuff. But he looked not out of place at all at that Tigers backline. I have to say, the Tigers have a very good history of picking good fullbacks. Every fullback we bring in usually does pretty well. So if that's anything to go by, I think Dane Laurie is going to be a really good player. My only concern is I was watching him on the weekend. I am a little bit worried about his size. He's only young, and we've seen the likes of Billy Slater go on to have insane careers. But saw it a lot with Corey Thompson, who is probably smaller than Dane Laurie, but he was a really good player. But just because he was really small, he would struggle to burst through the line and the tackles. Like, he would get through it, and then he couldn't fully drop them off, if you know what I mean. So I'm a little bit worried Dane Laurie might suffer a little bit from that. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how the spine looks for the Tigers with Dewey back. I think Mbai had a really bad game, and Brooks did as well. So hopefully Dewey fixes some of those issues. And yeah, excited to see Laurie progress over the course of this year. And at the moment, it's going to be hard to see anyone take Rookie of the Year off him because he looks like he's going to have a really good year. Looking forward to round 2 of the NRL Telstra Premiership. I think that's still what it's called. I don't even know. So I'm going to be making some predictions, more to do with betting actually. I'm not a big bettor myself, but I like analysing the betting markets to see who is the assumed favourite and stuff like that. So I'll have a sure bet of the week, an upset of the week, and I'll look at a few spreads, so like lines that I think are a bit generous to a team or something like that. Sure bet of the week, I'm going the Roosters to beat the Tigers. I just think, I'm a Tigers fan, so it's hard to say that, but the Roosters just looked so good on the weekend, and the Tigers, in my opinion, didn't look too good, especially in attack. The Tigers have beaten the Roosters only once since 2011, so in my opinion, I think the Tigers actually do pretty well against the big teams, but for some reason the Roosters is always one they've really struggled against. I think we have pretty good record at the Storm, or even if we lose, we generally compete with them. The Rabbitohs, I think we're pretty good against the Rabbitohs, but the Roosters in particular, Raiders are another one that we're not too good against, but the Roosters, they just always seem to be too classy for us. And yeah, the Tigers, as I said earlier, people are saying they were good in defence, but they did still concede 30 points to what you would have to say is a weaker attacking team than the Roosters in the Raiders. So I think the Roosters are a sure thing to beat the Tigers. I don't think it's all doom and gloom for the Tigers. I think round 3 against Newcastle is a winnable game. Then they've got, I think, the Cowboys and maybe the Dragons in round 5 and 6 or something like that. They've got a few winnable games in around there. But it is a tough start, starting with the Raiders and Roosters. So you got to feel for the Tigers and Michael Maguire, because he probably will come under some fire, but hopefully they put up a competitive performance. Upset of the week, I'm going Dragons to beat the Cowboys. Once again, similar to last week, there's a lot of the big teams playing smaller teams, so there's not too many upsets I'm confident in, but this one I think is the most likely. It's in Townsville, which obviously favours Cowboys, and probably is why they're a big favourite. They're actually paying $1.50 when I checked, which is pretty strong favouritism. But yeah, just the way the Cowboys looked on the weekend, I don't think they really deserve to be favourites, if at all, but not necessarily that heavy. Their attack looked woeful. They didn't score a single point. And yes, the Dragons are a significantly worse defensive team than the Panthers, but yeah, I still wouldn't be too confident in the Cowboys putting up 20 plus points. Dragons aren't great, but they put up some points against the Sharks. Sharks are a fairly good team, so I think if there's any, I'm not necessarily going to be tipping this way. I haven't actually done my tips yet this week, but I'm not too sure. It probably will maybe depend on some of the team news that comes out later this afternoon. But yeah, if I have to pick one of the upsets to happen, I think the Dragons to beat the Cowboys is a fairly solid chance. Looking at the line, just because I've said that, the Dragons at plus 5.5, I think that's fairly good odds there. I think the Dragons could easily win that game, and to lose within a try would be fairly standard, I'd say. The Bulldogs at plus 16.5. I think the Bulldogs were pretty impressive against the Knights. Yes, it was wet weather game, so they were never really going to get flogged, but I think they definitely showed signs. And on the other hand, I actually think the Panthers, who's their opponent this week, weren't actually as good. I think the Cowboys made them look a lot better than they were. So I think the Bulldogs might come out a little bit inspired after last week. I think it's their home game, so their new fans will get to come out and see their new signings and their new team under Trent Barrett. So I don't think they're going to win. I think the Panthers will be too good in the end, but plus 16.5, that's a pretty big victory for the Panthers. So I'm going to say Panthers will win by less than 16. So I'm going to say the Bulldogs at plus 16.5 is good value. And then the Raiders at under 6.5. I think the Raiders should be pretty strong favourites to beat the Sharks. Yes, they had a good win against the Dragons, but we saw last year the Sharks, they really struggled whenever they came up against a quality team like the Raiders are. And in NRL, to win a game, 8 points, 10 points, that's pretty common. So I don't think that's a smashing or anything. So I think that's a pretty fair call from me to get around the Raiders at minus 6.5. Looking forward to the rest of the games. The games I'm most interested in, probably the Warriors and Knights is a really interesting one. The 6 o'clock kickoff on Friday. Back-to-back early kickoff on Fridays for the Knights. The Warriors, they were good on the weekend, beat a good Titans team. The Knights, I think, they were alright. They were pretty good in the forwards, but I don't think creatively they were anything special. Blokes like Texoy and stuff had a quiet game, so I think they'll be looking to bounce back in terms of that. So on that side of things, however, they did score about 32 points, so I can't be too harsh on them. And the Warriors will be looking up to back up a good performance, so I'm excited to see that one. I think it will be a good measuring stick for both teams. If the Warriors come out and beat the Knights, then all of a sudden they'll be, I'll be considering them for my top 8. And then if the Knights lose, similarly, I'll probably be considering to fade them out. So that's a big game. And the other one's the Titans versus the Broncos. If the Titans come out and lose to the Broncos, then all of a sudden we've got serious concerns over them and they're probably going to have to move out of my top 8. And if the Broncos win this, all of a sudden they could be shooting up people's ladder predictions. They could become a really competitive team because on paper they have a fairly decent team. So they're probably the two storylines I'm looking out for most this weekend. Really looking forward to another good weekend of footy. Great to have the NRL back. It's such a great thought. I was saying this to my parents that it's just a beautiful thought to think for the next 6-7 months there's not going to be a weekend without footy. So I'm loving it. Very excited. In future weeks, I'm definitely going to try and get on my older brother and dad, maybe rotate them through. I'll try and be a bit organised this week. It was a little bit rushed, but I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe and follow us on all platforms if you can. Really appreciate the support. Lots more content coming out, a bit more AFL content coming out. I know there's not too much of a crossover between NRL and AFL, but stay tuned. Lots of content coming out from the On The Ball podcast, and thanks for watching or listening. Cheers.